Listen, I don't know what game you're playing, but I've been flying longer than you've been able to afford first class. The words sliced through Flight 847's cabin like broken glass. Vivian Hartwell, 48, with her platinum blonde hair and designer everything, wasn't just speaking. She was performing for an audience, making sure every passenger could witness her dismissal of the black woman and 9-year-old girl standing in the aisle. Maya Mitchell clutched her unicorn backpack tighter, brown eyes wide, as she processed the stranger's cruelty. She'd never heard an adult talk to her mother like that. What Vivian didn't know was that in exactly 27 minutes, her performance would cost her husband his $200,000 a year executive position, destroy their social standing, and turn the woman she was dismissing into the most powerful voice in corporate discrimination reform. The game she thought she was winning, she was about to lose spectacularly. Before we dive into this confrontation that grounded a flight, ended careers, and sparked industry-wide changes, drop your location in the comments. And if this moment of injustice makes your blood boil the way it did mine, smash that subscribe button. Your support helps us expose these stories. Now let's rewind to see how a routine business trip became a viral reckoning with American racism. Kendra Mitchell's 5:45 a.m. alarm shattered the silence of her Atlanta penthouse. At 34, she'd built next-gen analytics from a $500 loan into a data consulting empire worth $200 million. Her corner office commanded respect, but her favorite view was Maya sleeping beside her, arms and legs sprawled across the king bed like she owned the world. Slipping from beneath Egyptian cotton sheets, Kendra paused at her bathroom mirror. Today wasn't just business. In Phoenix, she'd finalized acquiring Thompson Industries Analytics division, a deal that would establish her as one of the youngest black women to broker an $85 million acquisition in the tech sector. But doubt crept in as she selected her Navy power suit. Was she pushing too hard, too fast? The industry whispers followed her everywhere. Lucky breaks. Diversity hire who got promoted beyond her abilities. Aggressive negotiator who intimidates boardrooms. She fastened her grandmother's gold bracelet, her armor against corporate warfare, and whispered her morning ritual. Grandma Rose, let your strength guide me today. Mommy Maya's sleepy voice drifted from the bedroom. Kendra found her daughter sitting up, rubbing tired eyes. Maya had inherited her father's lighter complexion and her mother's razor intelligence, a combination that drew curious stares wherever they went. Morning, baby girl. You're up early. I heard you walking around. Is today your big meeting? The meeting. Kendra had planned this Phoenix trip for months, arranging for Maya to stay with her sister Carmen. But at 7:15 a.m., everything shattered. Carmen emergency at hospital. 3-car pileup, 2 kids in critical condition. Can't take Maya. So sorry. No other options. Kendra's backup plan evaporated instantly. Regular nanny in Jamaica visiting family. Mother in Alabama caring for sick aunt. Every safety net gone, and the meeting couldn't be postponed. Not with Thompson Industries board flying in from 3 countries, specifically for this negotiation. Her phone buzzed. David Chen, next-gen board member. Kendra, final confirmation on Phoenix. You're traveling alone, right? Thompson's executives are traditional, old-school corporate culture. They value focus, and frankly, they have concerns about working with someone so young. Don't give them additional reasons to question your commitment. The coded language hit like a physical blow. Don't remind them you're a single mother. Don't show them the parts of your life that make them uncomfortable. Don't give them any excuse to walk away from the deal. The meeting will proceed as planned. Kendra replied carefully, not technically lying, but not revealing her impossible situation. After hanging up, she stared at Maya's expectant face. Her daughter was already dressed. Jeans, sneakers, and a bright t-shirt reading Future CEO that Kendra had bought her for her 9th birthday. A desperate idea crystallized. Maya, how would you like to see the desert? The child's eyes exploded with excitement. Really? On a real airplane? First class. Your own seat, your own meal, clouds outside the window. As Maya packed her art supplies with practiced efficiency, she'd learned early to be ready for her mother's demanding schedule. Kendra booked a second first-class ticket. The $200 cost made her wince, but missing this deal would cost millions. This acquisition would validate every sacrifice she'd made, every 18-hour workday, every missed school play, every boardroom where she'd been the only black woman, every assumption that she was the assistant rather than the CEO. She'd faced enough dismissive comments, enough rooms that fell silent when she entered, enough questions about her qualifications that never got asked of white male counterparts. Ready, mommy. Maya announced backpack positioned perfectly art supplies, organized with military precision. As their Uber navigated toward Hartsfield-Jackson International, Maya chattered about clouds and airplanes, while Kendra reviewed merger documents on her phone. She felt the familiar calculation that defined her life. Could she excel at both motherhood and leadership? Today would test that balance in ways she couldn't imagine. The morning Atlanta traffic gave way to airport chaos. Business travelers clutching coffee, families wrangling luggage, the perpetual hum of organized movement. Neither mother nor daughter suspected their routine flight would become a flashpoint for national conversations about race privilege and corporate accountability. Mommy Maya said, as they approached the terminal, "Why do some people look at us funny when we're together?" The question caught Kendra off guard. At 9, Maya was beginning to notice things. The double takes when people saw them together, the assumptions about their relationship, the subtle ways society questioned their bond. Some people make assumptions based on how others look. Kendra answered carefully. But what matters is that we know who we are, and we belong wherever we choose to go. Maya nodded with the serious consideration she brought to adult conversations. Like when Mrs. Johnson at school thought you were my nanny instead of my mom. Exactly like that. People see what they expect to see instead of what's actually there. Walking through the automatic doors into Hartsfield-Jackson's Monday morning rush, Kendra had no way of knowing that Maya's questions about assumptions and belonging would soon become the most important part of their journey. Not the destination, but the lesson about standing up for truth in a world that often preferred comfortable lies. The breakfast crowd moved with purposeful energy around them. Everyone focused on their own destinations, their own urgent business. But in a few hours, the questions of a 9-year-old girl would stop an entire airplane ground a flight and force hundreds of thousands of people to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, privilege, and justice. For now, though, they were just another mother and daughter heading to catch a plane carrying boarding passes that would soon become the center of a confrontation that would change their lives and reshape an entire industry's approach to discrimination. Hartsfield-Jackson's Monday morning ecosystem enveloped them. Business travelers clutching coffee like lifelines, families coordinating luggage logistics, the constant symphony of rolling wheels and boarding announcements. Maya's hand stayed secure in Kendra's as they navigated toward the first-class check-in counter. "Good morning, Kendra," greeted the agent, sliding their confirmations across the marble counter. "Mitchell, 2 tickets to Phoenix." The agent, a middle-aged white woman with perfectly applied makeup and a smile that seemed painted on, began typing, then hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she glanced between her screen and Kendra's face. "I'm showing..." Another pause, more typing. These tickets were purchased quite recently. Not a question, but weighted with implication. Legitimate first-class passengers don't book last minute. Real premium travelers plan ahead. The subtext hung in the air like smoke. Yesterday evening, Kendra confirmed, maintaining professional composure despite irritation prickling her spine. "And this is your daughter?" "Yes." The agent's attention shifted to Maya, who was admiring the thick boarding passes being printed. Flying with children in first class can be challenging. The cabin environment is designed for business travelers. "Are you certain it's the most appropriate choice?" Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Why does she keep asking about our tickets?" Mommy children's clarity cutting through adult duplicity. The question exposed what everyone could feel but wouldn't acknowledge. The extra scrutiny, the subtle questioning, the assumption that their presence in premium spaces needed justification. "Some people need extra time to process information," Kendra replied diplomatically, though her jaw tightened. The agent finally handed over their boarding passes with a smile that never reached her eyes. Gate A23. Boarding begins at 9:30. Security presented its own obstacle course. Despite clear TSA pre-check markings on their passes, the agents studying their documents seemed confused by the contradiction between their appearance and their expedited status. Regular security line might actually move faster this morning, suggested Agent Marcus Webb, gesturing toward the significantly longer standard queue. "System's been running slow in pre-check. We have pre-check status," Kendra pointed out, indicating the clear designation on their boarding passes. Behind them, a white businessman in an expensive suit approached the same checkpoint. Agent Webb glanced at the man's documents for exactly 2 seconds before waving him through with a cheerful, "Have a great flight, sir." The contrast was unmistakable, undeniable, and infuriating. Maya was randomly selected for additional screening, a process that took 15 minutes as TSA agents examined her unicorn backpack with the intensity of a bomb disposal unit. As her daughter raised small arms for the body scanner, looking vulnerable and confused, Kendra felt rage building in her chest. The controlled fury she'd learned to manage through countless microaggressions in her professional life. "Is this normal?" Mommy Maya whispered afterward, as they collected their belongings. "Unfortunately, yes," Kendra answered honestly. It was a lesson she'd hoped to delay. The understanding that their family would face different standards, different scrutiny, different assumptions wherever they went. Their journey through the terminal provided a masterclass in everyday bias. At the coffee shop, the barista asked twice if Kendra was certain about her order, as if a black woman might not know her own coffee preferences. At the newsstand, the clerk hovered while Maya browsed children's magazines, as if a 9-year-old might orchestrate elaborate theft schemes. But the encounter that crystallized everything happened near Gate A23. Robert Fleming, an executive Kendra recognized from industry conferences, approached while she reviewed merger documents, and Maya colored in her art pad. "Excuse me," he said with casual authority. "Could you tell me where the Admiral's Club Lounge is located?" The assumption was automatic, unconscious, but devastating. A black woman sitting in an airport must work there. She couldn't possibly be a fellow first-class passenger with her own lounge access, her own business, concerns, her own destinations. "I don't work for the airport," Kendra replied evenly, "but I believe the lounge is near gate B15. Fleming's face flushed with embarrassment as reality penetrated his assumption. "Oh, I'm sorry. Mommy runs a big company," Maya announced proudly, looking up from her artwork. "She has meetings with important people all the time." Fleming nodded awkwardly and escaped, leaving Kendra to process another reminder that no matter how successful she became, no matter how much she achieved, strangers would still see her skin color first and make assumptions about her place in the world. "Why did that man think you worked here?" Maya asked, with the directness children bring to adult hypocrisies. "Some people see what they expect instead of what's actually there," Kendra explained. "That's why it's important we always know our worth, regardless of what others might think. By boarding time, they'd endured dozens of small cuts, the 1,000 tiny moments that reminded them they were being evaluated, questioned, and measured against standards that white travelers never had to meet. Each interaction was minor in isolation, but together they formed a pattern as clear as fingerprints. Now, boarding Flight 847 to Phoenix, the gate agent announced. We'd like to invite our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance to board at this time. As they approached the boarding line, Kendra noticed the glances from other premium passengers, mostly white, mostly male business travelers, whose presence in first class never raised eyebrows or generated questions. A few looked curious, others seemed mildly disapproving, and several appeared completely indifferent to their existence. One woman in an expensive floral dress looked them up and down, with barely concealed surprise, her gaze lingering on Maya's colorful sneakers and cheerful backpack, as if children didn't belong in first class, regardless of their ticket status. Ready for your first-class flight? Baby girl, Kendra asked, choosing to focus on her daughter's excitement rather than the judgmental stares. Do they really have cookies shaped like clouds? Maya whispered loudly, her enthusiasm infectious despite the morning's challenges. Let's find out. As they handed their boarding passes to the gate agent and walked down the jet bridge toward Flight 847, neither mother nor daughter could have anticipated that their assigned seats would become the center of a confrontation that would test everything Kendra had learned about grace under pressure, everything Maya believed about fairness and truth, and everything America claimed to believe about equality and justice. The jet bridge stretched ahead like a tunnel toward their destination, but first they would have to fight for the right to occupy the seats they had legitimately purchased. A battle that would transform their lives and reshape an entire industry's approach to discrimination. The Boeing 737's first-class cabin gleamed under LED lighting leather seats, arranged in spacious 2-2 configuration, with small vases of fresh flowers mounted to the interior walls. Maya's excitement was infectious as she took in every detail. The extra legroom, the larger screens, the promise of elevated service. Welcome aboard, Jessica Torres, a young flight attendant with 5 years of service, according to her name tag, greeted them with genuine warmth. Her smile reached her eyes as she knelt slightly to address Maya directly. Is this your first time flying first class, sweetheart? Yes. Maya bubbled with unguarded enthusiasm. Mommy says I get my own TV screen and everything. You sure do. And if you need anything during the flight, anything at all, you just let me know. Okay. The interaction was warm, professional, exactly what Kendra had hoped for. But as they moved deeper into the cabin, she noticed Patricia Moore, the senior flight attendant, observing their progress with a more reserved expression. Patricia's greeting was polite, but noticeably cooler, her smile more practiced than welcoming. Boarding passes, please, Patricia requested, though she'd just watched Jessica verify their tickets at the entrance. Kendra handed over their passes without comment, recognizing the microaggression for what it was, but choosing not to escalate with Maya watching. The child was already enchanted by her surroundings, pointing at details and whispering observations that made other passengers smile. As they approached row 3, Kendra's mood shifted instantly from anticipation to disbelief. A woman had claimed both of their assigned seats like conquering territory. Vivian Hartwell, though Kendra didn't yet know her name, occupied the aisle position while her Louis Vuitton handbag commanded 3A and her cashmere coat was draped across 3B. She spoke loudly into her phone, her voice carrying throughout the cabin, with the unconscious authority of someone who believed her conversations were inherently important. I always sit in row 3, Richard, she was saying to whoever was on the other end. Always. It's become tradition. The flight attendants know me by name. Kendra cleared her throat politely. Excuse me, I believe these are our seats. Vivian glanced up with the mild annoyance of someone interrupted during an important call. Her eyes swept over Kendra's professional attire and Maya's excited face, and something hardened in her expression. A shift so subtle it might have been missed by casual observers, but unmistakable to someone who'd spent years reading corporate body language. There must be some mistake, Vivian said dismissively, not bothering to end her phone call. These are my seats. Maya stepped closer to her mother, confusion evident on her young face. But Mommy, our tickets say 3A and 3B. Vivian's gaze settled on Maya with what was supposed to be maternal patience, but came across as condescending superiority. Sweetie, your mom probably misread the numbers. Coach is behind that blue curtain. The suggestion hit Kendra like a physical slap. Not because there was anything wrong with coach passengers, but because of the assumption embedded in Vivian's words. The immediate conclusion that a black woman and child couldn't legitimately occupy first-class seats. That they must have made an error, must belong somewhere else, must be confused about their proper place in the aircraft's social hierarchy. I'd like to check our boarding passes together, Kendra suggested, her voice maintaining professional calm despite the fire building in her chest. She extended their boarding passes toward Vivian, who didn't even glance at them. I don't need to check anything, Vivian replied sharply, returning to her phone conversation. Richard, I'll call you back. Some confusion here about seating. She hung up and looked at Kendra with exaggerated patience. Listen, I understand this is probably your first time in first class, but I always sit in these seats. Always. The airline knows this. Around them, other passengers were beginning to notice the developing interaction. A businessman in 4C looked up from his laptop with mild interest. Two women across the aisle whispered to each other, while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. The boarding process behind them had slowed as people tried to navigate around the confrontation. Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin. Why won't the lady look at our tickets? Mommy. The innocent question cut through the ambient noise like a bell, highlighting the absurdity of the situation. There was no logical reason for Vivian to refuse to verify seat assignments, except for the assumption that she didn't need to prove her right to be there while they did. That's a very good question, baby girl, Kendra said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. She turned back to Vivian with steel in her voice. Ma'am, would you mind showing us your boarding pass so we can resolve this situation quickly? Vivian's posture stiffened, as if she'd been asked to perform some unprecedented imposition. I certainly will not. Do you know who I am? The question hung in the air like a challenge loaded with the kind of entitled authority that Kendra had encountered throughout her career. People who believe their identity or connections should override policies, procedures, or basic fairness. I don't, Kendra admitted calmly. But I do know we have tickets for these specific seats, and I'd appreciate your cooperation in resolving this situation. My husband is a vice president at Thompson Industries, Vivian announced, as if this fact should end all discussion. One phone call from me, and you'll never work again. The threat was delivered with casual cruelty, the kind of power play that Vivian had probably used successfully many times before. But she had unknowingly chosen the worst possible target. Thompson Industries wasn't just any company to Kendra. It was the very firm she was flying to Phoenix to conduct business with, the company whose executives she'd be sitting across from in 24 hours, negotiating a deal that would make her significantly wealthier than Richard Hartwell could likely imagine. The irony was almost amusing. Almost. Maya pressed closer to her mother, sensing the adult tension, even if she didn't understand its source. Mommy, why is she being mean to us? Before Kendra could respond, she noticed movement in the aisle behind them. Derek Martinez, a passenger in his early 30s with the casual dress and confident demeanor of a tech worker, had discreetly pulled out his phone and appeared to be recording the interaction. This is Derek Martinez going live from Flight 847. he said quietly into his device. We've got a situation developing in first class, where a white passenger is refusing to give up seats that clearly belong to a black woman and her daughter. Other passengers were now paying full attention. Dr. Angela Hayes, a trauma surgeon traveling to a medical conference in Phoenix, had looked up from her medical journal with growing concern. Harold Brooks, a retired federal judge with 30 years of courtroom experience, watched the interaction with the careful attention of someone who'd spent decades observing human behavior under pressure. Jessica Torres approached the row, her expression apologetic but increasingly stressed. Ladies, is there a problem here? We really need to complete boarding. Yes, there's a problem, Vivian said before Kendra could speak, her voice taking on the wounded tone of someone who'd been grievously wronged. These people are trying to claim my seats. The phrase "these people" landed with deliberate weight. Not this woman and her daughter. Not this family. These people. Language that created distance, emphasized otherness, reduced human beings to a category rather than individuals with names, rights, and legitimate boarding passes. Maya looked up at Jessica with the trusting expression children reserved for adults in uniform. We have the right tickets, she said simply, holding up their boarding passes and pointing to the seat numbers with her small finger. See. Jessica examined the passes carefully, then looked at Vivian with professional expectation. Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass? I shouldn't have to show anyone anything, Vivian replied, her voice rising slightly with indignation. I've been flying this route for 15 years. I always sit in row 3. This is how I'm treated for being a loyal customer. Patricia Moore appeared beside Jessica, drawn by the commotion and the growing line of passengers waiting to board. Her expression was harder to read, but Kendra noticed how Patricia's eyes moved between the participants, assessing not just the situation, but the potential optics of various resolutions. What seems to be the issue? Patricia asked in a tone that suggested equal responsibility for the conflict. I'm assigned to seats 3A and 3B, Kendra explained calmly, presenting their boarding passes for what felt like the 4th time. This passenger is occupying both seats and has refused to show her boarding pass. Patricia turned to Vivian with a deferential tone that hadn't been present when she'd addressed Kendra. Ma'am, I do apologize for any inconvenience. Would you mind if I took a quick look at your boarding pass? Just to help sort this out. Vivian sighed dramatically, as if being asked to follow basic airline procedures was an unprecedented imposition on her dignity. She rummaged through her expensive purse with exaggerated annoyance before producing a boarding pass. Patricia examined it, and Kendra caught a flicker of surprise cross her face. Ms. Hartwell, it appears your assigned seat is 7C. The revelation should have ended the confrontation immediately. Vivian was not only in the wrong seats, she was in the wrong row entirely, 5 rows away from where she belonged. But instead of apologizing or gracefully moving to her correct seat, Vivian's expression hardened, with an indignation that seemed disproportionate to a simple seating error. That's impossible, she declared. I specifically requested row 3. I always sit in row 3. There must be some mistake in your system. Maya clapped her hands softly, her relief evident. See? I told you we had the right tickets. Her innocent joy at being vindicated should have lightened the mood, brought some humor to what was obviously a simple mix-up. But Vivian's face flushed with an anger that suggested this was about much more than seat assignments. This is ridiculous, she announced loudly enough for passengers throughout first class to hear. I'm not moving to row 7. I'm a platinum member. I have status with this airline, and I've earned the right to sit where I want to sit. Derek Martinez's live stream was gaining viewers by the minute, comments flowing across his screen as people reacted to the developing confrontation. Flight 847 was already starting to trend on social media, though none of the participants were yet aware of their growing audience. Dr. Hayes leaned forward in her seat. Excuse me, But I've been watching this entire interaction. The child is absolutely correct. They have proper documentation for these seats. Harold Brooks nodded in agreement. The matter seems quite straightforward. The boarding passes speak for themselves. But rather than accepting the obvious resolution, Vivian doubled down on her position, setting the stage for an escalation that would transform a simple seating dispute into something far more significant and damaging. "I don't care what those papers say," she declared, her voice carrying throughout the first-class cabin. "I'm not moving, and I won't be bullied by these people." Maya looked up at her mother with growing confusion and fear. The word bullied hung in the air like an accusation, turning victim into aggressor, with surgical precision transforming a reasonable request into an attack. Kendra felt the familiar calculation that black parents knew too well. How far do you push? When do you stand firm on principle? When do you protect your child from witnessing systemic injustice? When do you model strength versus when you model strategic retreat? What she couldn't have known was that this moment would define not just their flight experience, but the trajectory of corporate diversity initiatives across the aviation industry. That Maya's confused questions would become catalysts for systematic change. That Vivian's intransigence would cost her husband his career and her family their social standing. The confrontation was just beginning, and neither woman was prepared to back down. The stakes were about to rise far beyond anyone could have imagined. "Listen, I don't know what game you're playing, but I've been flying longer than you've been able to afford first class." Vivian's voice sliced through the cabin with theatrical precision. She had risen from the disputed seats and now stood in the aisle like an actress claiming center stage. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed at Kendra with righteous indignation. "My husband is vice president at Thompson Industries. One phone call destroys careers. You have no idea what you've just started." Maya pressed against her mother's side unicorn backpack, clutched like armor. "Mommy, why is the lady yelling at us?" Kendra knelt to Maya's level, acutely aware that every eye in first class was witnessing their interaction. The moment felt crystalline, preserved in the kind of detail that would replay endlessly in her memory. "She's upset about making a mistake, baby girl. Sometimes adults get angry instead of fixing their problems." The gentle explanation delivered in Kendra's measured professional tone highlighted Vivian's hysteria more effectively than any direct confrontation could have. Derek Martinez had his phone positioned to capture both women whispering to his growing Instagram Live audience. "This is unreal, guys. White woman literally screaming at a 9-year-old because she doesn't want to sit in her assigned seat." His comment section was exploding. "This is 2024, not 1954. That poor kid. Karen alert level, maximum. Record everything. Make this go viral." Within the first 10 minutes, his viewer count had climbed from 500 to 5,000. The algorithm was picking up engagement, pushing the stream to wider audiences. Patricia Moore approached with visible reluctance, clearly hoping the situation would resolve itself without requiring decisive action. "Ladies, we really need to complete boarding. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone." Her phrasing suggested equal responsibility for the conflict, though the documentation clearly showed who was in the wrong. Dr. Angela Hayes stood from her seat with the clinical precision she brought to emergency rooms. "The solution is simple. Boarding passes indicate seat assignments. This isn't a negotiation." Dr. Hayes was a striking woman in her early 40s, with natural hair styled in elegant locks, and the quiet authority that came from making life-and-death decisions. Her intervention carried weight that transcended her passenger status. Vivian whirled toward this new challenger. "I wasn't speaking to you." "No, but you're performing loudly enough for everyone to hear," Dr. Hayes replied coolly. "And what I'm hearing is someone refusing to follow basic airline policies while intimidating a child. I am not intimidating anyone." Vivian's voice cracked with indignation. "I'm the victim here. These people are trying to steal my seats, and when I defend myself suddenly, I'm the bad guy. Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve with devastating innocence. We're not stealing Mommy. We paid for our tickets. The child's simple truth cut through the cabin's tension like a laser through fog. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably as the absurdity became undeniable. An adult arguing with a 9-year-old about documented seat assignments. Judge Harold Brooks cleared his throat from row 2, his judicial authority evident in every syllable. Ma'am, I've observed this entire interaction. The documentary evidence is unambiguous. Your boarding pass indicates seat 7C. Their passes indicate 3A and 3B. This is not a complex legal matter. Brooks carried himself with the dignity of someone who had spent 3 decades adjudicating disputes far more complex than airline seating. His measured assessment should have been decisive. I don't care what you think, you observed, Vivian snapped, though her tone was slightly less aggressive when addressing the distinguished older white man. I have platinum status. I have earned the right to sit wherever I choose. Derek adjusted his phone angle, his audience now approaching 12,000 viewers. The entitlement is absolutely incredible, he whispered to his stream. Multiple people with authority telling her she's wrong, but she just keeps doubling down. The chat was moving faster now. The audacity is unreal. That judge just schooled her. The kid asked the best question. Share this everywhere. American Airlines needs to see this. Jessica Torres returned to the scene, stress evident on her young face. At 26, she'd been trained to handle difficult passengers, but nothing in her manual had prepared her for managing a confrontation involving accusations of discrimination, while passengers live-streamed the interaction. Ms. Hartwell. Jessica said with careful diplomacy, I understand your frustration, and I truly appreciate your loyalty to our airline. However, seat assignments are determined by our booking system, and today, you're assigned to 7C, which is actually a window seat with extra legroom. It was a skillful attempt to reframe the situation, offering Vivian a face-saving explanation for moving. But rather than accepting the diplomatic lifeline, Vivian escalated further. Don't patronize me, young lady. I know exactly what's happening here. This is reverse discrimination, and I will not tolerate it. The phrase reverse discrimination detonated in the cabin like an emotional grenade. It was loaded with political implications, suggesting that asking a white woman to follow the same rules as everyone else somehow constituted unfair treatment. Derek's live stream erupted. Did she really just say reverse discrimination? For sitting in her assigned seat. The audacity is off the charts. This woman is completely unhinged. But Vivian wasn't finished. She made the calculated decision that would define the rest of the flight, deploying the performance of victimization. She's being aggressive with me, Vivian announced dramatically, her voice carrying to every corner of first class. I feel threatened by her behavior. The accusation was both predictable and devastating. Kendra had not raised her voice, had not made any threatening gestures, had not moved from her position in the aisle. But the aggressive black woman stereotype was so embedded in American culture that simply hearing the accusation could make observers question what they had witnessed with their own eyes. Maya looked up at her mother with confusion that broke hearts throughout Derek's audience. But Mommy, you're using your inside voice. Children with their unfiltered perception of reality often cut through adult manipulation to reveal simple truths. Maya's observation highlighted the gap between Vivian's accusations and observable behavior. Kendra remained composed, kneeling to her daughter's level despite the cramped space, and aware that thousands were now watching. You're right, baby girl. Sometimes adults say things that aren't true when they're upset about making mistakes. The gentle correction delivered with parental love and professional composure provided stark contrast to Vivian's theatrical victimization. Derek continued his commentary. For anyone just joining this black woman has remained completely calm throughout this entire interaction. She's literally just asking to sit in the seats she paid for. His stream had reached 25,000 viewers, with shares multiplying across platforms as people forwarded the content to friends, family, and social media networks. Other passengers were now openly choosing sides. Lisa Chen, an investment banker in 3C, had stopped pretending to check emails and was overtly recording. Robert Fleming from 4A looked increasingly uncomfortable with Vivian's behavior. Two women across the aisle were whispering angrily about the injustice they were witnessing. But not everyone was sympathetic. An older businessman in 2B had his arms crossed and was glaring at Kendra with obvious disapproval. A woman in row 4 was shaking her head, as if the entire disruption was somehow Kendra's fault. "This is insane," muttered Fleming. "Just show your boarding pass and move to your assigned seat." "Mind your own business," Vivian snapped at him before turning back to Patricia. "I want to speak to the captain. Now." Patricia looked increasingly trapped between competing pressures. Company policy clearly supported Kendra, but operational reality demanded managing Vivian's escalating disruption. "Ms. Hartwell, I can offer additional amenities if you move to 7C, but I cannot ask other passengers to give up their assigned seats." It was another diplomatic face-saving offer, but Vivian interpreted it as validation of her position. Finally, "This is how loyal customers should be treated. I'm offering amenities for moving to your assigned seat," Patricia clarified carefully, "not for keeping seats that aren't yours." The clarification deflated Vivian's momentary victory. She was being managed like the difficult passenger she'd become, not rewarded for her behavior. "This is unacceptable," Vivian declared, pulling out her phone with theatrical flourish. "Richard, I'm being harassed on flight 847. Some woman is trying to steal my seats and the crew is taking her side." Her voice was deliberately loud enough to be heard several rows away, ensuring maximum dramatic impact. She was unknowingly calling Richard Hartwell a vice president at the very company Kendra was flying to acquire, a phone call that would soon become evidence in corporate accountability proceedings. Maya tugged at her mother's jacket with innocent clarity. "Is the lady calling her daddy?" The question drew chuckles from nearby passengers, highlighting the childish nature of calling for rescue from a self-created problem. "Something like that, baby girl," Kendra replied, with just enough humor to signal her lack of intimidation. Vivian ended her call with renewed confidence, turning back to the assembled crowd. "My husband is handling this situation. You people have no idea who you're messing with. You people." The phrase had now been deployed twice, each instance more loaded than the last. It was becoming impossible for even sympathetic observers to interpret Vivian's language as anything other than racially coded. Dr. Hayes stood again, her movement deliberate and commanding. "Ma'am, I've been a passenger on commercial airlines for 25 years, and I've never witnessed behavior like this. You're not the victim here. You're the problem." Her words carried the weight of professional authority and moral clarity. As a trauma surgeon, Dr. Hayes was accustomed to making clear assessments under pressure, and her evaluation of the situation was unambiguous. Derek's stream was approaching 40,000 viewers. "This doctor is speaking. Truth. More people need to speak up like this. Don't let racism slide. That surgeon is a queen. Why aren't more passengers saying something?" The confrontation had attracted attention throughout the aircraft. Coach passengers were turning around to observe the commotion, and airport ground crew were beginning to notice the delayed boarding process. What had begun as a simple seating dispute was evolving into a public examination of privilege, entitlement, and racial dynamics in American society. Despite Vivian's escalating threats and theatrical victim performance, the documentation remained unchanged. She was in the wrong seats, refusing to move, delaying the flight for 150 other passengers. The stage was set for Captain David Harrison's intervention, a decision that would determine whether institutional authority would support justice or accommodate discrimination. And Maya, watching everything with the clarity that only children possess, was about to ask another question that would expose the fundamental corruption at the heart of the confrontation. Derek Martinez's phone screen blazed with notifications as his Instagram Live climbed past 50,000 viewers. Comments flowed like a digital waterfall. Outrage, support, and disbelief creating a real-time chorus of reaction to the discrimination unfolding in first class. "This is absolutely insane," Derek whispered to his audience, positioning his phone to capture both Kendra's composed dignity and Vivian's theatrical indignation. "This woman has the wrong seat, refuses to move, and is acting like she's being attacked for following basic airline rules." The engagement was unprecedented for his account. What had started as casual travel documentation was becoming citizen journalism of a discrimination incident playing out in real time. His comment section had become a digital town hall. "Share this everywhere. Someone call the news stations. That little girl is so brave. The mother has saint-level patience. This is why we need cameras on everything. Make this woman famous for all the wrong reasons." Derek's followers were amplifying the stream across platforms, creating viral momentum that would soon reach far beyond his original tech worker audience. Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook were beginning to buzz with clips and commentary about Flight 847. Dr. Angela Hayes had pulled out her own phone, typing rapidly on Twitter with the clinical precision she brought to medical documentation, currently witnessing blatant discrimination on American Air Flight 847. Black woman and 9YR old daughter being harassed by white passenger who refuses assigned seat. Multiple credible witnesses. This is 2024. This is completely unacceptable. Documentation and thread coming. Her first tweet was retweeted 50 times within 3 minutes. Dr. Hayes had 18,000 followers, many medical professionals, civil rights advocates, and academic colleagues, lending immediate credibility to her real-time reporting. The tweet caught the attention of Dr. Sean King, who retweeted it to his 1.1 million followers with the comment, "Are you kidding me? In 2024, we need every angle of this documented." Meanwhile, retired Judge Harold Brooks was having his own internal struggle. 3 decades on the federal bench had taught him to remain objective, to avoid inserting himself into disputes outside his courtroom. But his conscience wouldn't allow silence while witnessing clear discriminatory behavior. He approached Kendra with the measured dignity that had characterized his judicial career. "Ma'am, I don't usually involve myself in these situations, but I've observed this entire interaction. If you need credible witness testimony about what actually transpired here, you have my contact information." He handed her a business card, identifying him as the Honorable Harold Brooks, United States District Judge, retired. The gesture was subtle but significant, institutional weight backing Kendra's position. "Thank you, Your Honor," Kendra replied, recognizing both the title and the professional risk Brooks was taking by publicly choosing sides. Lisa Chen, the investment banker in Seat 3C, had initially tried to mind her own business. But as Vivian's behavior became increasingly egregious, Chen made a decision that would amplify the incident exponentially. She opened LinkedIn and began crafting a post to her network of 25,000 professional connections across finance and corporate America, currently witnessing shocking discrimination on American Airlines Flight 847. A black CEO and her 9-year-old daughter are being harassed by a white passenger who refuses to move to her assigned seat. The mother's grace under pressure is remarkable, while her child asks heartbreaking questions about why adults don't tell the truth. Multiple witnesses. Video documentation available. This is 2024. This cannot stand. Flight 847. Corporate accountability. Maya, processing the adult drama swirling around her, finally asked the question that would be quoted in news reports, civil rights discussions, and corporate diversity training sessions for years to come. Mommy, why do the grown-ups believe her when she's lying, but they don't believe us when we're telling the truth? The question detonated in the cabin like an emotional bomb. Derek's stream chat exploded. Oh my God, this kid just said everything. Out of the mouths of babes, I'm literally crying. That should be the headline. Kids see truth that adults hide. Several passengers were visibly moved by Maya's observation. Lisa Chen had tears in her eyes as she finished her LinkedIn post. Even Patricia Moore seemed shaken by the child's innocent clarity. Dr. Hayes vocalized what everyone was thinking. That little girl just asked the most important question on this airplane. But the social media momentum was building beyond anyone's control. Derek's stream had reached 75,000 viewers. Dr. Hayes' Twitter thread was approaching 2,000 retweets. And most significantly, viewers had begun crowdsourcing investigation of the incident. In Derek's comments section, digital detectives were at work. Found her Vivian Hartwell Phoenix resident. Her husband works at Thompson Industries VP level. Look up their diversity policies on the website. Screenshots of Richard Hartwell's LinkedIn before he deletes it. This is the same company that just won a diversity award. The internet's investigative power was being applied in real time to Flight 847. Within 20 minutes, Richard Hartwell's professional profile was being shared across social media, along with Thompson Industries' public statements about inclusion and equity. The irony wasn't lost on Derek's audience. "This is getting really interesting," he whispered to his stream. "Viewers have found out this lady's husband is a VP at some company that talks big about diversity on their website. The hypocrisy is incredible." Lisa Chen's LinkedIn post was gaining traction in corporate networks, being shared by diversity officers, HR executives, and business leaders who recognized the reputational risks of being associated with discriminatory behavior. But the most significant development was happening simultaneously across multiple platforms. The hashtag Flight 847 was beginning to trend as videos were shared, stories were amplified, and outrage built momentum. American Airlines' social media monitoring team was starting to receive alerts about the developing crisis. Thompson Industries' communications department would soon be fielding calls from reporters asking for comment about Richard Hartwell's wife's behavior. Back in the cabin, Vivian remained oblivious to the digital storm gathering around her performance. She continued her victim theater, unaware that every gesture, every word, every moment of her discriminatory behavior was being documented, analyzed, and shared with tens of thousands of viewers. Maya had been quietly observing the adult chaos, her young mind processing questions that cut to the heart of justice, fairness, and power dynamics in American society. She tugged at her mother's sleeve with another devastating observation. If we're telling the truth and she's lying, why do the airplane people look more scared of her than us? Again, childhood clarity cut through adult complexity. Maya had identified the power dynamics that adults were trying to ignore. The way authority figures deferred to Vivian's anger while subjecting Kendra and Maya to extra scrutiny. Derek's audience was approaching 100,000 viewers. This child is a philosopher. She sees what adults pretend not to see. Every question is more profound than the last. Future civil rights leader, right there. Why isn't every passenger standing up for them? The last comment highlighted an uncomfortable truth. While several passengers had spoken up in support of Kendra, many others remained silent, whether out of discomfort, fear of confrontation, or implicit bias that made them question what they were witnessing. Dr. Hayes was continuing to document the incident on Twitter, her thread now reaching thousands of people. Update. The 9-year-old just asked why adults believe lies instead of truth. This child has more moral clarity than most adults I know. Meanwhile, the disruptive passenger continues to claim victimhood while occupying seats that don't belong to her. This is a masterclass in white privilege. The social media storm was creating pressure that would soon reach corporate boardrooms far beyond the aviation industry. Civil rights organizations were beginning to share the content. News outlets were starting to monitor the hashtags. Corporate communications teams were preparing crisis management responses. And all of this momentum was building toward Captain Harrison's decision. A choice that would be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged by hundreds of thousands of people who would evaluate not just his handling of this specific incident, but the entire aviation industry's approach to passenger discrimination. The stakes were rising far beyond what any participant could have imagined when Vivian first claimed seats that weren't hers. Maya's innocent questions had crystallized moral dimensions that made comfortable compromise impossible and justice unavoidable. But justice, as they were about to learn, doesn't always arrive when it's most needed or most deserved. Captain David Harrison emerged from the cockpit with the measured stride of someone used to making critical decisions under pressure. At 52, with 28 years of commercial aviation experience, he'd navigated severe weather medical emergencies and unruly passengers. But nothing had prepared him for a discrimination incident being live-streamed to 150,000 viewers. Harrison was tall, with silver-streaked hair and the authoritative presence that usually ended disputes simply by appearing. His primary concern was operational, getting Flight 847 airborne before delays cascaded into missed connections throughout American Airlines' Phoenix hub. But there was something else weighing on him, something he wouldn't admit to his crew or acknowledge to himself. Harrison had flown corporate executives like Richard Hartwell dozens of times. He'd heard the conversations, the complaints about diversity initiatives going too far, the subtle pressure to maintain customer satisfaction for high-value passengers. He knew which side of this conflict would be easier to manage. "What's the situation here?" he asked, his voice carrying practiced calm. Derek adjusted his phone angle to capture the captain's entrance, whispering to his audience, "Captain's finally here. This is where everything gets decided." His live stream chat was moving too fast to read individual comments, but the general sentiment was clear. Viewers were hoping for justice, but expecting disappointment based on historical patterns of how these situations typically resolved. Vivian immediately launched into her rehearsed victim narrative, her voice taking on the wounded tone of someone who'd been grievously wronged. "Captain Harrison, thank God you're here. I've been harassed and threatened by these people who are trying to steal my seats. I'm a platinum member. I always sit in row 3, and I should not have to endure this kind of treatment from other passengers or your crew." Her performance was polished, hitting calculated notes. Loyal customer victimization implied threat to airline relationships. It was advocacy that had probably worked countless times before when dealing with service industry disputes. Harrison turned to Kendra with what appeared to be neutral assessment, though something in his body language suggested he'd already begun forming conclusions. "And your perspective, ma'am." Kendra had been mentally preparing for this moment throughout the escalating confrontation. She knew her response would likely determine the outcome, and she chose words with the precision of someone who'd spent years navigating corporate politics and racial dynamics. "Captain Harrison, my daughter and I have boarding passes for seats 3A and 3B. This passenger is occupying our seats and has a boarding pass for seat 7C. When asked to move to her assigned seat, she began making accusations and threats. We've remained calm throughout and followed all procedures." Maya stepped closer to her mother, looking up at the captain with the trusting expression children reserved for authority figures in uniform. "Our tickets match our seats," she said simply, her small voice carrying clearly through the cabin. "I can show you if you want to see them." The child's offer to provide evidence was both heartbreaking and powerful. A 9-year-old understanding that documentation mattered, that truth could be proven, that adults should be reasonable when presented with facts. Doctor. Angela Hayes rose from her seat with medical authority, radiating from every gesture. Captain, I'm Dr. Angela Hayes, trauma surgeon at Phoenix General. I've witnessed this entire incident from beginning to end. The documentation is unambiguous. The behavior patterns are crystal clear, and the appropriate resolution is obvious. Her clinical assessment provided objective perspective that should have transcended the emotional dynamics of the dispute. Judge Harold Brooks added his judicial weight. Captain Harrison W. Harold Brooks, retired federal judge. This situation involves one passenger refusing to comply with standard airline policies, while another passenger has done nothing wrong. The resolution should be straightforward. Two highly credible professional witnesses providing clear assessments that supported Kendra's position. Their intervention should have been decisive, but Harrison was facing competing pressures that had nothing to do with justice. Derek's stream audience watched this critical decision point with intense focus. The judge and doctor both spoke up. If he still sides with Karen, the system is broken. Please, please, please do the right thing. The whole world is watching this moment. Don't fail this family. Captain Vivian sensed the momentum shifting against her and deployed her most powerful weapon, the performance of endangered victimhood. Captain, I feel unsafe, she announced dramatically, her voice projecting to every corner of first class. This woman has been aggressive and intimidating throughout this entire interaction. I'm genuinely concerned about what might happen if you take her side over mine. It was masterful manipulation, invoking the specter of physical danger to justify continued accommodation of her unreasonable demands. The aggressive black woman stereotype was so embedded in American culture that simply raising the possibility could make observers question their own perceptions. Maya looked up at her mother with confusion that broke hearts throughout Derek's live stream audience. But Mommy, you haven't been mean to anyone. You've been using your nice voice the whole time. The child's innocent observation demolished Vivian's manipulation with surgical precision. Out of the mouths of babes came the simple truth that adults were working hard to obscure. Kendra knelt to Maya's level, focused entirely on her daughter, despite knowing that over 150,000 people were watching their interaction. You're right, baby girl. Sometimes adults say things that aren't true when they're upset about making mistakes. The gentle correction delivered with parental love and professional composure provided stark contrast to Vivian's theatrical victimization. Captain Harrison surveyed the cabin, taking in the faces of passengers clearly invested in his decision. He saw Dr. Hayes with her arms crossed, her medical authority, radiating disapproval of any accommodation of Vivian's behavior. He saw Judge Brooks with the disappointed expression of someone who'd spent decades watching justice delayed or denied. He saw Derek and other passengers with phones documenting every moment for posterity. But he also saw his operational priorities. Flight 847 was now running 45 minutes behind schedule. Connections in Phoenix were at risk. Ground control was asking for explanations. Corporate executives would be reviewing delay reports. And in his 28 years of flying, he'd learned that the path of least resistance usually meant removing the problem that was easiest to move, even if that problem was the victim rather than the cause. In that moment of moral calculation, Captain David Harrison made the decision that would define his career, destroy his reputation, and haunt his conscience for years to come. Ms. Mitchell, he said, turning to Kendra with an expression of regret that didn't match his words. In the interest of maintaining our departure schedule and ensuring the safety and comfort of all passengers, I'm going to ask you and your daughter to deplane while we sort this situation out with ground services. The words hit the cabin like a physical force. Dr. Hayes gasped audibly. Judge Brooks shook his head in visible disgust. Lisa Chen immediately began typing furiously on her phone. Derek's live stream exploded with outrage. No, 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 no! Are you kidding me right now? They're removing the victims. This is America in 2024. I'm so angry I can't even type. Everyone, Record this, share this everywhere. Maya looked up at her mother, with the confusion of innocence confronting systematic injustice. Mommy, are we in trouble? We didn't do anything wrong. The question asked in a small voice, filled with bewilderment, crystallized the moral failure of Harrison's decision. A 9-year-old girl who had followed every rule, presented proper documentation, and behaved with perfect courtesy was being punished for an adult's refusal to follow basic airline policies. Kendra felt the familiar rage that every black parent knew, the fury of watching your child learn that fairness wasn't guaranteed, that justice wasn't automatic, that doing everything right couldn't protect you from discrimination. But her response was measured, professional, designed to maintain Maya's sense of security, even as their world tilted toward injustice. No, baby girl. We're not in trouble. We haven't done anything wrong. Sometimes adults make unfair decisions, but that doesn't change who we are or what we deserve. As they gathered their belongings to leave the aircraft, Vivian's triumphant expression was captured by multiple phones and transmitted to hundreds of thousands of viewers who were witnessing a masterclass in how privilege operates. Create a problem. Claim victimhood. Then watch as those who did nothing wrong bear the consequences of your behavior. Dr. Hayes stood as they passed her row, her voice carrying clearly. This is wrong. This is discrimination, plain and simple, and I'll testify to that fact in any court in America. Judge Brooks nodded with the gravity of his judicial experience. In 30 years on the federal bench, I've never seen a clearer case of disparate treatment based on race. Their moral authority provided validation, but it couldn't change Harrison's decision or undo the injustice being perpetrated in full view of the world. Derek continued streaming their departure. This is unbelievable. They're removing a mother and daughter who did absolutely nothing wrong, while letting the woman who caused this entire disruption keep the seats she's not even supposed to have. The walk up the aisle felt endless, each step documented by multiple cameras, each moment preserved for a viral record that would eventually reach millions of viewers. Maya clutched her unicorn backpack, her small hands secure in her mother's grip, her trust in adult fairness forever altered by what she had experienced. As they reached the jet bridge, Captain Harrison made an announcement over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay due to a passenger service issue. We should be underway shortly. Thank you for your patience and understanding. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise what had actually happened. An airline captain had chosen operational expedience over moral courage, removing paying customers from their assigned seats to accommodate disruptive discrimination. Within hours, Captain David Harrison's name would be trending on social media, alongside hashtags about corporate accountability and institutional racism. His decision would be analyzed by civil rights organizations, dissected by legal experts, and used in business schools as a case study of leadership failure under pressure. But in that moment, as Kendra and Maya disappeared into the jet bridge, he had achieved his operational goal. Flight 847 would soon depart for Phoenix, only 90 minutes behind schedule. The question that would torment him for the rest of his career was that time saved worth the cost to his conscience, his profession, and his airline's reputation. The customer service office at Gate A23 felt like a pressure cooker, floor-to-ceiling windows providing views of the bustling terminal while offering no escape from the digital wildfire spreading across social media. Thomas Reynolds, passenger service supervisor, with 12 years of experience managing airline crises, had never handled a situation that was trending nationally while he tried to resolve it. Kendra sat rigidly in an uncomfortable chair, while Maya drew furious scribbles in her art pad. Stick figures with angry faces, standing next to airplanes under dark storm clouds. The child's artwork had shifted from excitement about flying to processing trauma through crayon therapy. Ms. Mitchell, I want to start by apologizing for what just happened. Thomas began carefully, his corporate training making him avoid any direct admission of liability. We're conducting a full review of the incident to understand how the situation escalated to this point. Kendra's professional composure showed stress fractures after the public humiliation she'd endured. Mr. Reynolds, let's be very clear about what happened. My daughter and I were removed from an aircraft for occupying our correctly assigned seats, while a passenger in the wrong seat was allowed to remain. There's nothing to review here. There's discrimination to acknowledge and address. Maya looked up from her angry artwork, her small voice cutting through corporate doublespeak. The mean lady lied, and the airplane man believed her instead of us. Thomas winced at the child's assessment, which stripped away all pretense to expose the harsh reality of what had occurred. His phone had been buzzing continuously for the past hour. Calls from American Airlines corporate headquarters, regional management, and increasingly aggressive reporters who'd somehow obtained his direct number. The incident wasn't contained to Flight 847. It was metastasizing across the internet with viral velocity. On his computer screen, Thomas could see Derek's live stream had reached 200,000 concurrent viewers. The comments section was a blur of outrage calls for boycotts and demands for immediate accountability. Flight 847 was trending number 2 nationally on Twitter, behind only a major international news story. Ms. Mitchell Thomas continued following his crisis management playbook. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation for this inconvenience. Travel vouchers, upgrade certificates, elite status, and priority rebooking on the next available flight to Phoenix. It was the standard corporate response to service failures: throw benefits at the problem and hope it disappears quietly. But Thomas was beginning to realize this situation transcended vouchers and upgrades. Kendra's phone rang. Nathan Brooks, her attorney, had been monitoring the situation through social media alerts. "Excuse me," she told Thomas, stepping slightly away while keeping Maya in her sight. "Kendra, I've been watching this unfold online," Nathan said without preamble. "This is textbook discrimination with unprecedented documentation. Clear evidence, multiple credible witnesses, video from numerous angles, and disparate treatment based on race. We have grounds for a substantial federal lawsuit against American Airlines." "What kind of exposure are we talking about?" Kendra asked, her business instincts engaging, despite her emotional state. 8 figures potentially. But more importantly, this could force systematic changes across the aviation industry. This isn't just about compensation. It's about preventing this from happening to other families. Stand by, Nathan. Let me see how they propose to resolve this first. Ending the call, she returned to Thomas, who had been monitoring the social media storm on his computer with growing alarm. "My attorney believes we have grounds for a significant discrimination lawsuit based on today's events," Kendra informed him. "Before we explore legal remedies, I'd like to hear how American Airlines plans to address what happened." Thomas's training had covered difficult passengers and service failures, but nothing had prepared him for managing a discrimination incident that was going viral while he tried to contain it. His desk phone rang. Patricia Williams, Regional Director of Customer Relations, calling from Dallas. "Thomas, I'm boarding a plane to Atlanta right now," Patricia said without preamble. "Whatever it takes, do not let Ms. Mitchell leave that office until I arrive. This situation is already a corporate nightmare, and it's getting worse by the hour." "Ma'am, it's trending nationally. We have major civil rights organizations sharing the videos, news outlets calling for statements, and I'm getting reports that our stock price is starting to drop. Then we're past damage control and into crisis management. I'll be there in 4 hours. Keep her comfortable, document everything, and start preparing talking points for media requests." After ending the call, Thomas found Kendra reviewing something on her phone that had shifted her expression from frustration to something approaching strategic calculation. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Actually, yes. It appears that Mrs. Hartwell's husband, Richard Hartwell, the Thompson Industries vice president she kept mentioning, is about to have a very difficult conversation with his board of directors. Kendra showed Thomas her phone screen, displaying Lisa Chen's LinkedIn post, which had now been shared over 15,000 times. Urgent. Richard Hartwell of Thompson Industries needs to address his wife's discriminatory behavior on American Airlines Flight 847. Video evidence shows clear racist actions against Black CEO and her 9-year-old daughter. Thompson's diversity and inclusion policies ring completely hollow when executives' families behave like this in public. Shareholders and business partners should take note. Corporate Accountability Flight 847. The post had generated hundreds of comments from corporate executives, diversity officers, and civil rights advocates. Thompson Industries' after-hours stock price was down 4%, as investors reacted to the negative publicity and potential reputational damage. But the most significant development was happening in Phoenix, where William Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries, was receiving urgent calls from board members who were watching the incident unfold in real time across social media platforms. Sir Thompson's assistant had interrupted his late afternoon strategy meeting. "You need to see what's happening with Richard Hartwell's wife. It's all over social media, and it's starting to affect our stock price and business relationships." Thompson watched Derek's live stream with growing horror, recognizing immediately that this wasn't just a customer service incident. It was a corporate crisis that threatened to undermine years of diversity initiatives and damage relationships with key business partners. What Thompson didn't yet know was that the woman his executive's wife had been harassing was Kendra Mitchell, CEO of Next Gen Analytics, the company he was scheduled to acquire a major division from in less than 18 hours. Back in the Atlanta Airport customer service office, Thomas was fielding another urgent call from American Airlines' corporate legal department, while Kendra continued monitoring social media updates about the incident. Ms. Mitchell, Thomas said after ending his call, "I've just been informed that our regional director is flying here personally to address this situation. She has full authority to resolve this matter at the highest levels." "That's not necessary," Kendra replied, checking the time on her phone. "I have a critically important meeting in Phoenix that cannot be postponed under any circumstances." What she didn't tell Thomas was that her meeting was with Thompson Industries, the same company whose executive's wife had just humiliated her and Maya in front of hundreds of thousands of online viewers. The irony was almost poetic in its justice. Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve with the directness that had characterized all her questions throughout this ordeal. "Mommy, are we still going to see the desert? You said it was important." The child's question reminded everyone in the room what was truly at stake beyond corporate liability and legal strategies: a little girl's faith in fairness, justice, and the reliability of adult promises. Thomas ended another call and turned back to them with authorization for unprecedented compensation. "Ms. Mitchell, I've been granted authority to offer first-class rebooking on any flight today. $25,000 in travel vouchers, lifetime platinum elite status, and a personal written apology from our CEO." It was a package far beyond American Airlines' standard compensation offerings, reflecting the severity of their legal exposure and reputational risk. Mr. Reynolds, Kendra said carefully, "While I appreciate these gestures, this was never about money or airline perks. This is about my daughter witnessing discrimination firsthand and learning that sometimes doing everything right isn't enough protection if you're Black in America." Her words carried emotional weight that made Thomas visibly uncomfortable. He was trained to handle service complaints and operational issues, not to address the deeper implications of systematic racial discrimination. Meanwhile, back on Flight 847, which had finally departed for Phoenix, the atmosphere remained toxic. Vivian Hartwell still occupied the disputed seats, but her victory felt hollow as other passengers made their disapproval clear through cold stares, pointed comments, and social media posts tagging American Airlines with criticism. Derek's documentation had continued throughout takeoff, his audience now exceeding 300,000 viewers, as the story gained momentum across platforms. "The energy in this cabin is really dark," he reported to his stream. "Passengers are openly discussing American Airlines boycotts. The flight attendants look stressed and embarrassed. And the woman who started all this, she's acting like nothing happened." His comment section remained a continuous scroll of outrage. "Never flying American again. That poor little girl will remember this forever. Sue them for everything they're worth." The mother showed incredible restraint. "This is exactly why we need federal anti-discrimination enforcement." Back in the customer service office, Thomas received another call that would change the trajectory of the entire situation. This time, it was from Jennifer Walsh, assistant to William Thompson at Thompson Industries, though Thomas didn't immediately grasp the significance. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Thompson Industries' corporate office. Our CEO needs to speak with Ms. Kendra Mitchell immediately regarding an urgent business matter that's become critical due to today's incident." Thomas looked at Kendra with confusion and growing awareness that this situation had dimensions he didn't understand. "Ma'am, there's a call for you from Thompson Industries." Kendra's expression shifted as the pieces clicked into place. William Thompson had obviously made the connection between the viral discrimination incident and their scheduled acquisition meeting. "I'll take the call," she said, accepting the phone from Thomas. "Ms. Mitchell, this is William Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries. I've been watching what happened to you and your daughter today, and I want to personally apologize for my employee's wife's completely unacceptable behavior." Thompson's voice carried genuine distress mixed with something approaching panic. "I had no idea Richard's wife was capable of such conduct. It contradicts everything our company stands for and everything I thought I knew about his character." Kendra allowed a strategic pause before responding. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your call. I assume you've realized that we're scheduled to meet tomorrow morning about the acquisition." "Yes, and I want you to know that this incident doesn't change our commitment to that partnership. In fact, it makes me more determined than ever to work with leaders who handle adversity with the grace and dignity you've demonstrated today." It was a remarkable reversal of fortune. What had begun as Vivian's attempt to leverage her husband's corporate position had instead demonstrated exactly why companies like Thompson Industries needed partners like Kendra Mitchell, leaders who could maintain composure and professionalism under pressure while never compromising their principles. "I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Thompson. However, I think you have some serious internal issues to address before we finalize any business partnerships." "Absolutely. Richard Hartwell has already been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. His wife's behavior reflects cultural problems that go far beyond this single incident." As the call ended, Thomas looked at Kendra with new understanding and growing concern about the magnitude of the situation he was trying to manage. "You're the CEO. Thompson Industries is meeting with tomorrow." "I am. And this incident has given me considerable leverage in our negotiations, though. That was never the point of standing up for what's right." The stakes were rising exponentially beyond anything Thomas had imagined. What had begun as a seating dispute was evolving into a case study of corporate crisis management, systematic racial discrimination, and the power of social media to demand immediate accountability from institutions that had historically avoided consequences for discriminatory behavior. And Maya, quietly teaching the adults around her that the most profound questions about justice often come from the clearest consciences, was about to help reshape how major corporations address bias and discrimination in their operations and corporate cultures. American Airlines Regional Crisis Management Center in Dallas buzzed with emergency activity. Patricia Williams sat at the head of a conference table, surrounded by lawyers, public relations specialists, and increasingly panicked executives, all monitoring multiple screens displaying the real-time social media catastrophe surrounding Flight 847. Status report, and make it comprehensive, Williams commanded. Her 20-year career in airline crisis management had never encountered an incident of this magnitude and viral acceleration. Flight 847 is trending #1, nationally reported Marcus Chen, social media director, his voice tight with professional stress. We're approaching 5 million total engagements across all platforms in just 6 hours. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and international outlets have requested official statements. The NAACP has issued preliminary condemnation. Multiple civil rights organizations are calling for federal DOT investigation. On the room's largest screen, Derek Martinez's live stream continued broadcasting from the Phoenix-bound aircraft, with an audience exceeding 400,000 concurrent viewers. The passenger had become an inadvertent journalist, providing ongoing coverage of what news outlets were already calling the most documented discrimination incident in modern aviation history. Passenger status update, Williams demanded, though she dreaded the answer. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it, admitted Thomas Reynolds via video conference from Atlanta. Ms. Mitchell is CEO of Next Gen Analytics, traveling for a major corporate acquisition. The disruptive passenger, Vivian Hartwell, is married to Richard Hartwell, VP at Thompson Industries, the exact company Ms. Mitchell was flying to conduct business with. The room fell into stunned silence as the implications crystallized. This wasn't merely a customer service failure. It was a corporate relationship disaster with potential losses in the tens of millions. Get William Thompson on the phone immediately, Williams ordered. And someone start calculating our exposure if this goes to federal court. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, Thompson Industries was conducting its own emergency session. The executive boardroom was filled with directors who'd been summoned for what internal legal assessment was calling a potential existential corporate crisis. Gentlemen, William Thompson began his typically composed demeanor, showing visible strain. We have a situation that threatens everything we've built regarding corporate reputation and business relationships. Richard Hartwell's wife has created what may be the most documented case of racial discrimination in recent aviation history, and the victim is Kendra Mitchell, CEO of the company we're acquiring tomorrow morning. Board member David Chen leaned forward with visible concern. What's our financial exposure here? Beyond immediate calculation, Thompson replied grimly. Ms. Mitchell's company is valued at $200 million. Our acquisition would have added $50 million in annual revenue and established us as a major player in data analytics. But our reputation as a diversity-forward corporation is being destroyed in real time across social media. Thompson Industries had invested years and millions building an inclusive reputation. Their website prominently featured diversity initiatives. Annual reports highlighted minority hiring statistics, and their corporate social responsibility programs had won industry awards. All of that carefully constructed image was being demolished by Vivian Hartwell's documented behavior. Richard needs immediate termination, declared board member Sarah Kim, without hesitation. We cannot have a VP whose spouse engages in public racism that's been viewed by millions of people. It's more complex than that, Thompson replied, pulling up social media analytics on the room's screens. Our preliminary investigation reveals this wasn't an isolated incident. Employee surveys. We rushed into the field this afternoon show patterns of exclusionary behavior across multiple departments under Richard's oversight. Thompson had spent the last 3 hours reviewing personnel files with growing alarm. Richard Hartwell's performance evaluations revealed consistent patterns of questioning minority employees' qualifications, making comments about cultural fit when evaluating diverse candidates, and creating work environments where discriminatory attitudes were tolerated as long as they weren't explicitly documented. Back in Atlanta, Kendra was fielding calls from reporters, colleagues, and civil rights organizations, while Maya continued processing the day's events through her artwork. The child had moved beyond angry stick figures to drawing what appeared to be superhero figures. Women with capes standing up to cartoon villains labeled mean people. Mommy Maya said, looking up from her art pad, "Are we famous now?" It was an innocent question that highlighted how dramatically their lives had changed in just 6 hours. Kendra had built her career on professional competence and strategic thinking, not viral celebrity. But sometimes, history chooses its protagonists rather than the other way around. I think people are paying attention to what happened to us because it helps them understand problems that affect many families. Kendra explained carefully, aware that Maya's processing of this experience would shape her understanding of justice and advocacy for years to come. Her phone buzzed with a call from Reverend Dr. Marcus Washington of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. "Ms. Mitchell, we've been monitoring your situation throughout the afternoon. We'd like to offer our organization's full support for whatever legal action you pursue. This incident represents exactly the kind of systematic discrimination our organization was founded to combat." The call was followed by similar offers from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the National Urban League, and several other prominent civil rights organizations. What had begun as a personal incident was rapidly becoming a symbol of larger systemic issues affecting air travel, corporate accountability, and racial justice. Thomas Reynolds received word that Patricia Williams's plane had landed in Atlanta, and she was en route to the airport. He also received intelligence that made the situation even more complex. CNN had obtained airport security footage showing the entire pre-boarding incident, including Vivian's behavior at the gate and her attempts to board early. Ms. Mitchell Thomas said carefully, "Our regional director will be here within the hour, and she has substantial authority to resolve this situation at the corporate level. Would you be willing to hear our comprehensive proposal before making final decisions about legal action?" Kendra considered the request while watching Maya's artwork continue to evolve. Her daughter was demonstrating remarkable resilience, but she had also been forced to confront ugly realities about injustice at an age when children should still believe in fundamental fairness. "I'll listen to what you have to say," Kendra agreed. "But understand that my primary concern is ensuring my daughter learns that standing up to discrimination has meaningful consequences for the people who engage in it, not just empty apologies and vouchers." Patricia Williams arrived at the customer service office, accompanied by 2 corporate attorneys and a crisis communications specialist. She was an imposing woman in her 50s, with silver hair and the commanding presence of someone who had managed corporate disasters across multiple decades and industries. Ms. Mitchell Williams began extending her hand with practiced corporate diplomacy. "I'm Patricia Williams, and I want to personally apologize for the completely unacceptable treatment you and your daughter received today." Maya looked up from her coloring, with the directness that had characterized all her interactions throughout this ordeal. "Are you the boss of all the airplane people?" Williams knelt to the child's level, with what appeared to be genuine, rather than performative empathy. "I'm one of the bosses, and I want you to know that what happened to you today was wrong. We're going to work very hard to make sure it doesn't happen to other children." "That's good," Maya replied with serious consideration. "Other kids shouldn't have to feel sad and scared like I did." Williams turned back to Kendra with visible emotion. "Ms. Mitchell, we've conducted a comprehensive review of today's incident through security footage, passenger testimonies, crew reports, and social media documentation. Our findings show multiple policy violations and clear evidence of discriminatory treatment. We're prepared to offer immediate and meaningful resolution." It was corporate language, but Kendra recognized the implicit admission of legal liability. What does meaningful resolution look like in your assessment? First, Captain Harrison has been suspended indefinitely pending full investigation. The senior flight attendant who failed to properly address the discrimination has been removed from customer-facing duties. Second, we're implementing new protocols specifically designed to prevent discriminatory enforcement of seating and service policies. Williams paused to consult her notes. Third, we're prepared to offer substantial financial compensation, lifetime elite status for your entire family, and most importantly, we'd like to invite you to chair our newly established Passenger Rights Advisory Council with significant authority over policy development. Kendra recognized the moment when companies shifted from damage control to strategic partnership recruitment. You want me to help redesign the systems that failed us today? We want to ensure this never happens to any family again, Williams replied. And we believe your expertise as a CEO, combined with your experience as a victim of our failures, provides exactly the perspective we need to create meaningful, lasting changes. Before Kendra could respond, her phone rang with William Thompson, calling back from Phoenix. Mr. Thompson, she answered, putting the call on speaker for everyone to hear. Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to update you on the actions we've taken. Richard Hartwell has been terminated effective immediately with cause. We're also launching a comprehensive review of our corporate culture diversity training programs and hiring practices. This incident has been a profound wake-up call for our entire organization. The speed of corporate accountability was remarkable, but not surprising given the public pressure and documented evidence of discrimination. I'm pleased to hear about your internal actions, Kendra replied strategically. However, I think our acquisition discussions need to include a thorough examination of how this incident reflects broader cultural issues that could affect our business partnership. Absolutely. In fact, I'd like to propose that NextGen Analytics serve as our primary consultant for corporate culture transformation, with appropriate compensation, reflecting the critical importance of this work. Maya looked up at her mother with the innocent wisdom that had characterized her observations throughout this entire experience. Mommy, did we help fix things so other kids will be safer? The child's question captured something profound about the potential impact of their traumatic experience. What had begun as discrimination was becoming a catalyst for systematic change that could benefit countless other families. I think we're helping to fix some important things, baby girl, Kendra replied. Sometimes when bad things happen to us, we can use those experiences to make sure good things happen for other people. Patricia Williams watched this mother-daughter interaction with what appeared to be genuine emotional response, rather than corporate calculation. Miss Mitchell, would you be willing to work with us to create industry-wide training programs based on today's experience? Your daughter's questions have been more effective at exposing bias than any corporate training materials we've ever developed. It was an extraordinary offer. The victims of discrimination being invited to reshape the systems that had failed them with the authority and resources to create meaningful change across an entire industry. Kendra looked at Maya's latest artwork. Superheroes standing up to villains. Airplanes filled with diverse, smiling passengers. Storm clouds giving way to bright sunshine and rainbows. I'll seriously consider your proposals, she said finally. But any partnership will need to include concrete accountability measures, regular assessment of actual outcomes, rather than just policy changes, and genuine commitment to systematic transformation, rather than cosmetic improvements. As if summoned by the conversation, Thomas's phone rang with news that would cement the scope of transformation. Already beginning, Derek Martinez's live stream had been picked up by every major news network, and the incident was leading evening news broadcasts across the country and internationally. The story had evolved far beyond a single incident to become a global conversation about discrimination, corporate accountability, and the power of social media to demand immediate justice from institutions that had historically avoided consequences for discriminatory behavior. Maya closed her art pad and looked around the room at all the adults who were suddenly paying serious attention to problems they had previously ignored or minimized. Will other kids really be safer now? She asked with the directness that only children possess when cutting through adult complexity to reach fundamental truths. Patricia Williams looked at this 9-year-old girl who had inadvertently become a catalyst for industry-wide policy changes. Yes, sweetheart. Other kids will be much safer because you were brave enough to ask the right questions today. 8 weeks after Flight 847, American Airlines headquarters in Fort Worth resembled a transformation hub more than a traditional corporate office. Conference rooms that typically hosted quarterly financial reviews were now dedicated to what had been designated the Maya Protocol, a comprehensive overhaul of passenger service policies named after the 9-year-old whose questions had exposed systematic discrimination flaws. Jennifer Martinez, CEO of American Airlines, addressed her executive leadership team in a crisis management session that had been extended daily for 6 weeks. The financial implications had been staggering, but ultimately manageable. $67 million in immediate losses from booking cancellations, stock price decline of 15% before recovery, and corporate partnerships requiring renegotiation. But the long-term impact was proving transformational. Implementation status across all operations. Martinez demanded her tone, reflecting both the gravity of their reputation crisis and growing optimism about emerging solutions. Maya protocol deployment is 78% complete across all domestic hubs, reported Patricia Williams, who had been promoted to Executive Vice President of Passenger Equity and Inclusion. We've trained 22,000 employees in the first phase, with international rollout beginning next month. The Maya Protocol wasn't merely another diversity training program. It represented comprehensive systematic overhaul, addressing everything from initial passenger interactions to conflict resolution procedures, bias, recognition and accountability, enforcement. Named after Maya Mitchell, whose innocent questions had cut through adult complexity to expose discrimination, the protocol established evidence-based guidelines that prioritize documentation over assumptions. Technology integration status. Martinez asked. Marcus Chen, now Director of Bias Prevention Technology, displayed analytics on the conference room's main screen. The Justice Documentation System is operational across all aircraft and gate areas. Any passenger service dispute triggers automatic recording with footage reviewed by specially trained equity officers within 12 hours. We've identified and corrected 847 potential discrimination incidents before escalation. The system had been developed in partnership with Kendra Mitchell's Next-Gen Analytics team, whose expertise in data analysis and pattern recognition proved invaluable for identifying discriminatory behavior patterns that traditional training programs consistently missed. Employee response and adaptation. Martinez continued. Initial resistance was significant, Williams acknowledged. Approximately 23% of staff expressed concern about increased scrutiny and documentation requirements. However, voluntary bias reporting has increased 340% since implementation, suggesting employees feel more empowered to address discriminatory behavior before it escalates into major incidents. But the changes hadn't been universally embraced. Internal surveys revealed that some longtime employees felt the new protocols were excessive, that the company was overreacting to a single incident. A few senior managers had quietly questioned whether the Maya protocol represented appropriate response or corporate overcorrection. Meanwhile, Thompson Industries was experiencing its own comprehensive transformation. The Phoenix boardroom, where William Thompson had once planned routine acquisitions, was now headquarters for the Hartwell Accountability Initiative, systematic corporate culture review prompted by Richard Hartwell's termination and his wife's viral discrimination incident. Our 6-week internal assessment is complete, reported Dr. Angela Coleman, the diversity consultant Thompson Industries had hired to conduct thorough organizational analysis. The Hartwell incident wasn't isolated. We've documented patterns of exclusionary behavior across 7 departments, affecting approximately 34% of our minority employees. Thompson reviewed the findings with visible discomfort. Anonymous employee surveys revealed that Hartwell had consistently questioned Black employees' qualifications, regularly made comments about cultural fit when evaluating diverse candidates, and fostered environments where discriminatory attitudes were tolerated as long as they remained undocumented. Recommended systemic response, Thompson asked. Complete restructuring of hiring and promotion practices, mandatory unconscious bias training for all management personnel, implementation of the next-gen analytics diversity monitoring system, and quarterly culture assessments with transparent reporting. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The company originally targeted for acquisition was now being contracted as the primary consultant for fixing cultural problems the incident had exposed. But Thompson's transformation faced internal resistance. 3 senior executives had quietly expressed concerns that the company was implementing extreme measures in response to one employee's spouse's behavior. 2 board members had questioned whether the cultural overhaul represented appropriate corporate responsibility or unnecessary accommodation to political pressure. Back in Atlanta, Kendra was reviewing quarterly reports when CFO Sarah Kim entered with stacks of new contracts. "The business impact has been extraordinary," Sarah announced, spreading documents across Kendra's desk. Consulting requests from 18 major airlines, 57 Fortune 500 companies. The Department of Transportation wants comprehensive bias detection algorithms for federal oversight, and we're fielding inquiries from international aviation authorities. The business transformation had been remarkable. What began as traumatic discrimination had positioned Next-Gen Analytics as the leading corporate consultant for bias prevention, discrimination detection, and systematic culture change across multiple industries. Thompson Industries acquisition status, Kendra asked. Sarah smiled with satisfaction. Completed 3 weeks ago, but terms changed dramatically in our favor. William Thompson was so concerned about corporate reputation and legal exposure that he agreed to our original offer, plus an additional $30 million in diversity initiative funding and ongoing consulting contracts. Maya burst through the office door after school, her unicorn backpack replaced with one reading, "Future CEO Who Changes Things," a gift from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She had adapted to unexpected celebrity with the resilience children bring to extraordinary circumstances. Mommy Mrs. Rodriguez says, "We're famous for making airplanes fairer for everyone," Maya announced, settling into her designated chair with homework and art supplies. "That's right, baby girl. Sometimes when difficult things happen to us, we can use those experiences to help other people." Maya pulled out her current project, a detailed drawing of diverse families boarding an airplane with smiling faces, flight attendants welcoming everyone equally, and a rainbow stretching across a clear blue sky. "Are there still kids getting treated mean like I was?" Maya asked with the serious expression she developed when processing complex adult issues. The question that continued driving much of Kendra's advocacy work. Unfortunately, yes, but the systems being implemented were designed to identify and address discriminatory situations before they escalated into traumatic incidents. Kendra's computer chimed with an email from Patricia Williams. Maya Protocol. Month 2 results. 1/247. Potential discrimination incidents identified and resolved before escalation. Employee bias reporting increased 380%. Passenger satisfaction among minority travelers improved 31%. Most importantly, we've received 0 discrimination complaints that escalated to social media incidents since implementation. The email continued with a request that had become routine. "We'd like Maya to participate in our next international training video series, sharing her perspective on how discrimination affects children." Her questions continue being more effective than any adult-developed training materials. Maya had become an inadvertent educator whose observations about fairness were being incorporated into corporate training programs across multiple industries. Her question: why do grown-ups believe her when she's lying, but they don't believe us when we're telling the truth, was being used in bias recognition training for judges, police officers, teachers, corporate managers, and government officials. Derek Martinez called about documentary production updates. Kendra Netflix has greenlit the full series. Flight 847. When Children Lead Change will be 6 episodes examining how Maya's questions are transforming corporate culture across different industries. International distribution confirmed. The documentary proposal represented dozens of media requests they'd received. Maya's story had become a case study in how children's perspectives on justice often expose adult failures more effectively than sophisticated analysis. "We'll participate selectively," Kendra replied, "but Maya's education and emotional well-being remain our priority." Maya looked up from her math homework with another characteristically direct question. "Mommy, do you think that mean lady learned to be nicer to people?" The question about redemption and personal growth remained complicated. Vivian Hartwell had effectively disappeared from public view after her husband's termination. Their Phoenix home had been sold, social media accounts deleted, previous social connections apparently severed. There were unconfirmed reports they had relocated to a smaller city, hoping to avoid recognition. "I don't know, sweetheart," Kendra answered honestly. "Some people find it very difficult to change their attitudes and behavior. But what matters is that many other people did learn from what happened, and they're working hard to make things better." Maya nodded with the acceptance children demonstrate when processing imperfect adult realities, then returned to her homework with the focused attention of someone who understood that education and preparation were tools for changing the world. As Kendra watched her daughter work, she reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had transformed a routine business trip into a catalyst for industry-wide, systematic change. The discrimination they experienced was traumatic and unjust, but its documentation and viral spread had created opportunities for meaningful reform that might prevent similar incidents for countless other families. The Maya Protocol was being studied and adapted by international airlines. Diversity monitoring systems, developed by Next-Gen Analytics, were being implemented by corporations worldwide, and Maya's questions about fairness and truth were being used to train adults about recognizing and addressing unconscious bias across multiple sectors. But the transformation wasn't complete or universal. Some airlines had resisted implementing similar protocols, arguing they were unnecessary or excessive. Several corporations had declined to adopt the diversity monitoring systems, claiming existing training programs were sufficient. Political opposition had emerged, with some commentators arguing that the incident had been overblown and the responses represented inappropriate corporate capitulation to social pressure. The resistance reminded Kendra that systematic change was gradual, incomplete, and required ongoing vigilance. Progress was being made, but it was neither automatic nor permanent. Still, as Maya continued her homework while humming softly, a sound that had been absent for weeks after Flight 847, Kendra allowed herself to feel cautious optimism. Sometimes justice does arrive, even if it comes in unexpected packages, and requires extraordinary circumstances to emerge. And sometimes the most profound social changes begin with a child asking why grown-ups don't tell the truth. 18 months after Flight 847, Kendra Mitchell stood at the podium of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, delivering keynote remarks to an international audience of government officials, corporate leaders, and civil rights advocates. The woman who had been unceremoniously removed from her assigned airline seat had become one of the world's most influential voices on transportation discrimination and corporate accountability. The question my daughter Maya asked on that airplane, "Why do grown-ups believe her when she's lying, but they don't believe us when we're telling the truth?" has become the foundation for systematic policy changes across 47 countries. Kendra said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had transformed personal trauma into global progress. In the audience, Patricia Williams from American Airlines sat beside William Thompson from Thompson Industries and Director General Maria Santos from the International Civil Aviation Organization. The coalition of unlikely allies had emerged from the Flight 847 incident to become advocates for transportation equity worldwide. The statistics Kendra presented were remarkable, but incomplete. The Maya protocol had been adopted by 26 major airlines globally, preventing over 200 documented discrimination incidents in 18 months. Corporate bias reporting had increased an average of 290% across participating companies. Passenger satisfaction among minority travelers had improved by an average of 24% on airlines implementing the protocol. But numbers alone don't capture the complete impact, Kendra continued. Real success is measured in children who don't experience traumatic discrimination, families who travel with dignity, and institutions that have learned to prioritize justice over convenience. Maya, now 11 years old and sitting in the front row, watched her mother with the mixture of pride and slight embarrassment that children feel when their parents receive international recognition. She had grown comfortable with her inadvertent role as a civil rights icon, while maintaining focus on normal childhood interests, school friends, soccer, and her evolving artistic talents. After the speech, Secretary General Antonio Guterres approached them personally. Ms. Mitchell, the United Nations, would like to formalize our partnership with NextGen Analytics to develop bias detection protocols for international transportation systems. Your work demonstrates technology's power for identifying discrimination before it becomes systematic oppression. The UN contract represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with a simple request to sit in assigned airplane seats. Kendra's company was now positioned to influence transportation and anti-discrimination policies at the global level. But the transformation hadn't been universally successful or accepted. The individuals involved in the original incident had experienced dramatically different outcomes that reflected the complex consequences of viral accountability in the digital age. Captain David Harrison, who had made the decision to remove Kendra and Maya from the aircraft, had been terminated by American Airlines after internal investigation confirmed policy violations and discriminatory decision-making. He was now working as a freight pilot for a small charter company. His commercial aviation career effectively ended. His decision on Flight 847 had become required study in aviation management programs as an example of how operational priorities could override moral courage with devastating professional consequences. Vivian Hartwell had effectively vanished from public life. Her husband Richard's termination had forced them to sell their Phoenix home and relocate to rural Montana, where they hoped to avoid recognition. Vivian's behavior had made her unemployable in her previous luxury real estate career, and the family had struggled financially. There were unconfirmed reports that she was receiving mental health treatment for anxiety and depression related to the public scrutiny and social ostracism that followed the viral incident. Jessica Torres, the young flight attendant who had tried to address the situation professionally, had been promoted to Director of Crew Cultural Training and was now responsible for implementing Maya protocol training across American Airlines' international workforce. Her respectful treatment of Maya and Kendra during the crisis had been recognized and rewarded. Derek Martinez had successfully transitioned from accidental citizen journalist to professional documentary filmmaker focused on social justice issues. His Netflix series, Flight 847, When Children Lead Change, had been nominated for an Emmy and had sparked conversations about transportation discrimination in over 30 countries. Dr. Angela Hayes and retired Judge Harold Brooks had both become regular speakers at international human rights conferences, their credible witness testimony lending institutional authority to discussions about bystander intervention and moral courage in confronting discrimination. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact was being felt in educational systems worldwide, where Maya's questions about fairness and truth had been incorporated into curricula about critical thinking, social justice, and civic responsibility. Teachers across 6 continents were using her story to help children understand that questioning unfair authority was not only acceptable, but essential for social progress. The Maya Mitchell Standard had become international educational shorthand for encouraging children to ask direct questions about injustice rather than accepting discriminatory treatment as normal or inevitable. As Kendra concluded her UN presentation, Maya joined her on stage for brief remarks that had become an anticipated tradition at major conferences. "I was scared on that airplane," Maya said into the microphone, her young voice carrying clearly through simultaneous translation to the international audience. "But my mom taught me that when something is wrong, you have to speak up, even if it's difficult. I learned that kids can ask questions that help grown-ups see problems they were ignoring." The assembly gave Maya a sustained standing ovation, recognizing not just her childhood courage, but her ongoing role as an inadvertent catalyst for systematic change across multiple institutions and countries. Riding back to their hotel afterward, Maya looked out at Lake Geneva and asked another of her characteristically profound questions. "Mommy, do you think what happened to us was worth all the changes that came after?" It remained a complex question from a child who had been forced to mature faster than natural development would suggest, who had witnessed societal ugliness, but also seen how trauma could be transformed into progress for others. "Bad things should never happen to anyone," Kendra answered carefully, watching her daughter process the philosophical complexity. "But when they do happen, we have choices about how to respond. We can let difficult experiences make us angry and bitter, or we can use them to ensure other people don't face the same unfairness." Maya considered this with the wisdom children develop when forced to process complex adult realities. "I'm glad other kids won't have to feel scared and confused like I did. That makes the scary parts worth it." As their taxi approached the hotel, Kendra reflected on the extraordinary global transformation that had begun with Vivian Hartwell's refusal to show her boarding pass. The discrimination they experienced was traumatic and unjust, but its documentation and viral spread had created opportunities for systematic reform that was preventing similar incidents worldwide. The Maya Protocol was being studied and adapted internationally. Corporate bias monitoring systems were being implemented across industries, and transportation policies were being rewritten to prioritize evidence over assumptions in dozens of countries. Sometimes history does choose its protagonists rather than the other way around, and sometimes the most profound questions about justice and fairness emerge from the clearest consciences and most innocent perspectives. Maya pulled out her phone to text friends about seeing the Swiss Alps, her life having achieved a new equilibrium that balanced occasional appearances as a human rights advocate with normal childhood activities and educational priorities. "Can we visit the Red Cross Museum tomorrow?" she asked her mother. "I want to learn about other people who helped make things fairer." It was a perfectly reasonable request from a child who had learned that individual voices could reshape institutional policies, that simple questions about fairness could trigger systematic change, and that sometimes the most important social progress begins with someone asking why adults accept lies instead of demanding truth. As they entered the hotel lobby, Kendra's phone buzzed with a message from the International Air Transport Association. "Ms. Mitchell, we wanted to inform you that the Maya Protocol has now been recommended for adoption by aviation authorities across 52 countries. Your daughter's questions continue educating adults about recognizing and addressing bias in transportation systems worldwide. Thank you for transforming a painful experience into global progress toward equality and justice." Maya had become an inadvertent ambassador for human rights. Her childhood clarity about fairness helping adults recognize and address discrimination across cultures, languages, and national boundaries. As she settled into homework that evening, she remained focused on the future she was building, through education, preparation, and the fundamental belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. The story of Flight 847 had ended, but the systematic changes it had sparked were continuing to evolve and expand. And Maya Mitchell, the 9-year-old who had asked why grown-ups believed lies instead of truth, continued growing up in a world that was gradually becoming more, just because she had refused to accept that discrimination was normal, inevitable, or acceptable. The journey toward justice was incomplete and imperfect, but it was undeniably underway. And sometimes that's how the most important changes begin, not with grand declarations or political movements, but with a child asking why fairness isn't universal, and adults finally listening to the answer. This story serves as a powerful reminder that confronting discrimination requires both courage and strategic thinking. Kendra's experience demonstrates how bias manifests in everyday situations where people of color must navigate unfair treatment while maintaining composure under intense scrutiny. It illustrates the impossible calculations that Black parents face when deciding whether to challenge injustice or protect their children from witnessing systematic unfairness. Most importantly, Maya's innocent questions remind us that children often perceive truth more clearly than adults who have learned to rationalize or ignore discriminatory behavior. Her simple observations about fairness and honesty cut through complex social dynamics to expose fundamental injustices that adults had become conditioned to accept or overlook. The story also demonstrates how systematic change often begins with individuals who refuse to accept unfair treatment, even when accommodation might be easier or more convenient. By handling discrimination with grace under pressure, while never compromising her principles, Kendra created a moment that resonated far beyond her personal experience, catalyzing corporate accountability and inspiring policy reforms across multiple industries and countries. Perhaps most powerfully, we see how documentation and social media can transform isolated incidents of discrimination into catalysts for widespread systematic change. Derek Martinez's live stream ensured the incident couldn't be dismissed or forgotten, while credible witnesses like Dr. Hayes and Judge Brooks provided testimony that legitimized discrimination claims and demanded institutional response. The Maya Protocol, named after a child whose questions exposed adult failures, represents the kind of meaningful reform that can emerge when corporations choose accountability over damage control. Rather than simply apologizing and implementing cosmetic changes, participating airlines and companies developed structural modifications designed to prevent similar incidents through early identification and intervention. However, the story also acknowledges that progress is neither automatic nor universal. Some institutions resisted change. Some individuals faced devastating consequences for their discriminatory behavior, and some problems persisted despite policy modifications. Real social change is gradual, incomplete, and requires ongoing vigilance to maintain and expand. What discrimination stories have you witnessed or experienced in your own travels, workplace, or daily interactions? Have you ever had to stand up against bias? Or do you wish you had found the courage to intervene when you saw unfair treatment? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and speaking up helps others recognize these patterns and find courage to address them. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true stories about standing up against injustice. Share this with someone who might need to hear Maya's message that children's questions about fairness can expose adult failures and transform systematic discrimination into systematic reform. Hit the bell icon to get notified when we upload new content, and let us know in the comments what other stories of courage and justice you'd like to hear. Your engagement helps us reach more people with these important messages. Together, we can create the change we wish to see in the world. One conversation, one policy, one moment of moral courage at a time. And sometimes, the most profound changes begin when someone has the wisdom to ask why things are unfair and the courage to demand better answers. Remember to like this video if it moved. You subscribe for more incredible true stories, and share it with friends and family who need to hear about the power of standing up for what's right. Your support helps us continue bringing these vital stories to light. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about justice. And thank you for being part of a community that believes in making the world more fair for everyone.